Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this launch of the 2025 edition of the OECD's Agricultural Policy Monitoring Evaluation. This year's edition is entitled Making the Most of the Trade and Environment Nexus in Agriculture. This morning, we will start. The Secretary-General to the OECD, Mathias Cormann, will give a short overview of the key findings via video, and then we will hear from the OECD Director for Trade and Agriculture, Marion Jansen, who will give a presentation going into some more of the findings and including recommendations for countries. And then we will hear from three representatives of OECD countries. Sitting on Marion's right, it is the New Zealand's ambassador to the OECD, Caroline Bilkey. Next to her is Jochem Veers, who is the Netherlands ambassador to the OECD. And here on my right is Mr. Osamu Kubota, who is the Deputy Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries of Japan. Thank you. And without further ado, if we could hear from the Secretary-General.
Good morning and a very warm welcome to this launch of the 2025 OECD Agricultural Policy Monitoring and Evaluation Report, our 38th edition of this report. This report provides the latest OECD insights on agricultural policies across 54 countries, representing about 75% of global agricultural value added. The 38 OECD members, 5 non-OECD European Union member states, and 11 emerging market economies. Our analysis in this year's edition shows that governments provided about $842 billion US per year in subsidies and other forms of support to agricultural producers and consumers on average between 2022 and 2024. This is 20% higher than the subsidies and other support which was provided on average between 2015 and 2019 in nominal terms, which was about $704 billion per year at that time. As a proportion of the sector's total production value, agricultural subsidies and other forms of support have declined significantly, reaching 18% of production value on average between 2022 and 2024, down from about 29% in the period some 20 odd years earlier. The subsidies with the strongest potential to distort markets, including price support for producers, payments based on output and subsidies for inputs, such as fertilizers or fossil fuels, declined in parallel from 15% of the sector's production value on average between 2000 and 2002 to 9% in 2022 to 2024. However, these subsidies still represent about half of total agricultural support provided today, or about $410 billion US out of the $842 billion US in total support. Phasing out market distorting subsidies and replacing them with better targeted support can help unlock higher agricultural productivity, boost innovation and foster more sustainable, resilient and efficient food systems, ultimately improving both the quantity and quality of production and incomes. Redirecting support towards research and innovation is a key priority. This includes support for innovation to boost sector productivity. Over the past decade, the total factor productivity growth of agriculture across the world has slowed to just 0.8% per year in the decade from 2013 onwards, and down from 1.7% annually in the decade from 1991 onwards. Greater support for research and innovation into new crop varieties and production techniques, for example, can help reverse this trend and enhance affordability for consumers as well as producer incomes. However, government support for research and innovation has actually declined from just 0.92% of the agriculture sector's production value in 2000 to 2002 to even less at just 0.54% in the period 22 to 24. Governments can also better target their agricultural support towards environmental sustainability goals. For example, payments to farmers can be targeted to encourage practices that contribute to broader environmental preservation goals, such as regenerative agriculture to restore soil and capture carbon. These practices can ultimately protect long-term sector productivity and resilience to shocks such as flooding and soil erosion. Currently, only about 5% of support to farmers is linked to these types of voluntary actions, compared to 66% that is potentially harmful to the local environment, depending on the context, including, of course, affecting water quality or increasing air pollution. Trade agreements can also be a valuable tool to encourage the adoption of more sustainable agricultural practices. For example, in the Agreement on Climate Change, Trade and Sustainability signed in 2024, Costa Rica, Iceland, New Zealand and Switzerland committed to liberalize research and experimental development services related to the sustainable use and reduced risks of pesticides and fertilizers. Harmonization of agriculture sustainability clauses across trade agreements would facilitate their implementation and monitoring. It would help reduce compliance costs for businesses and also help ensure a more level playing field for sustainable practices. In conclusion, this report highlights opportunities for the more effective and more targeted use of limited government resources to help enhance food affordability and security, to support climate adaptation and mitigation, and to sustain the livelihoods of the millions of households that depend on agriculture directly or indirectly around the world. The OECD will continue to provide our evidence base in support of well-functioning agricultural markets, a global level playing field, and a rules-based trading system in good working order. I will now hand the floor to my valued colleague, Marion, to present the more detailed findings of this report. Thank you.
Welcome everybody to this release of the 2024 report, Agricultural Policy Monitoring and Evaluation. It's the first time that we release this report during the OECD Agricultural Week, and I'm very pleased that we managed to do this time, and I'm pleased to see you so numerously in the room. As every year in this report, we provide you with the latest numbers on government support to agriculture. You heard these figures already from the Secretary-General, but here you will see how these figures evolve. You see that in the average for the latest 3-year period, 2022-2024, is at 842 billion, as mentioned before. But what you see nicely in this chart is that this level of support is stabilizing at a significantly higher level than it was before the pandemic that happened in 2020. So some stabilization, but at a high level. And as you also heard already, a significant amount of that support, around 50%, is considered to have the potential to be significantly market distorting. In terms of value of production, and value of production can be measured in different ways. However, the support to the sector has declined in OECD countries. You heard the report covers 54 countries. 38 of these countries are OECD members. Here you see figures where that express the government support in terms of gross farm receipts. And you see that between the beginning of the century and today, that percentage has gone down quite significantly from close to 30% to now 1.3%. Importantly, the 11 emerging economies covered by this report have increased the share of their support in terms of gross farm receipts. Now, if you consider support in terms of gross farm receipts as a measure of how competitiveness may be affected, this evolution is quite important. The OECD is known for arguing in favor of directing more spending to innovation, infrastructure, to anything that enhances productivity in the sector. We released a few years ago a report saying that over the next decade, productivity growth has to increase by 28%, an increase that would be threefold the productivity increase that we witnessed in the 10 years before. Now, for this, you need investment. But what we have been observing over time, that spending on general services like innovation and infrastructure has fallen. It was 112, it is currently stands at 112 billion, so it's around 13% of total spending. But you see that in terms of share of the importance of that spending, that has gone down quite significantly. What the figure here reflects, the share of spending in terms of value of production, that stands at 2.4% today. It stood at 4.7% at the beginning of the century. So halving of the value of spending on general services and innovation and infrastructure in terms of value of production. If we take out of the general services, if we zoom into the spending on agricultural knowledge and innovation systems, so that's a sub-item that it's very explicitly directed towards innovation, that stands at 0.5%. It stood at above 0.9% at the beginning of the century. Again, that share is going down. A little bit of hope. If you look at the most recent years, we are seeing a turn in an upward region, and we encourage you into an upward direction, and we encourage in this report to continue that trend. You have heard that this year's report zooms into the trade and environment nexus. We therefore also looked into in our government support measures. We tried to get a better understanding of the share of support that has in one way or another a relationship to environmental requirements. And what you see in this pie chart is that close to 1/4 of government support is related to requirements related to environmental performance. But most of the time, these environmental requirements relate to already mandatory regulations. So it's support to do something that you are by law required to do. Only a small percentage, 5%, of the spending of the government support is related to voluntary environmental requirements. So this is a way of encouraging going beyond what law already requests you to do. But increasingly, we do see, indeed, government support being linked to environmental requirements. Now, let me go a bit more deeply into the subtitle of the report, indeed, making the most of the trade and environment nexus, because we did not only look at how is government support related to environmental requirements, we looked also at whether there are requirements to environmental performance in agriculture in trade agreements. Trade is important for the agricultural sector, and agricultural trade is booming. It has increased fivefold since 1995. An important part of agriculture, of food products, crosses borders. Around 400 billion a year in value of agri-food trade crosses 2 or more international borders. That's an indication of value chain trade. Several steps are taken in order to receive the final consumer. And 20% of all calories consumed have crossed at least one border. Trade is important, I said, because it helps us to ensure food security and healthy diets. The importance of trade for resilience has always been known in the agricultural sector. Extreme weather events can have a regional character, a local character, can sometimes wipe out harvests in an entire country. Having access to the opportunity to trade is therefore important for food security. Trade helps to improve resource efficiency, and agricultural trade has a relationship with environmental performance. There are effects that can go in a positive or in a negative direction. So trade, important for food security, efficiency, and hence productivity levels, and for the environment. Now, another international agency has been collecting information on voluntary standards, voluntary environmental, voluntary sustainability standards that are relevant for trade. So that's not government regulations, but standards that are either voluntary or even private sector in nature that are relevant for different sectors in the economy. And what you see here in this chart is that voluntary standards are particularly relevant for the agro-food sector. Agriculture and food appear very high in this chart at your left. Agriculture highest and food second. Often, trade agreements of different nature make reference to environmental standards or sustainability initiatives of different nature, voluntary, not voluntary. That number has increased over time. And actually, you see an exponential increase in recent years. And that's what this chart shows, that and here only OECD members are covered in this chart. So it's not the 54 countries, but only OECD members. You see between the end of the last century and last year, really an upward slope in terms of what we are calling trade-related measures that are relevant for environmental sustainability in agriculture. You see that that number has increased, and 60% of the trade-related measures for agricultural sustainability currently in place have been introduced in the past 6 years. That's a lot. So we see the relevance of environmental sustainability increasing over time, including in trade agreements. We see that it also plays a role in the way that government support is being designed. And this is the more specific environmental messages that come out of this report. When it comes to the policy recommendations in the report, and this is my last slide, they go beyond the charts that I've just presented to you. I did mention at the beginning that government support has stabilized at a high level, that a high percentage of that support has still the potential to be distortive for production and for trade. So we recommend to reform and reorient the most distorting forms of support towards policies with demonstrated benefits, including for sustainability. We continue to argue strongly in favor of shifting support to innovation and general service more generally, anything that can enhance productivity. Productivity growth has been too slow in recent years, and therefore the long-term trend we have seen of support for innovation declining is not a good one. Among the 54 countries in this report, most also are concerned about the benefits for farmers of agricultural activity and about their revenue, and many of them are concerned about resilience of the farming sector and environmental sustainability. We argue in this report in favor of targeted and tailored mechanisms to deliver direct benefits for farmers in terms of revenue for farmers. We argue in favor of using the OECD risk management framework that has been agreed by our members in recent years to promote resilience in the sector. And we promote to think about the trade-offs when you think environmental protection and openness to trade. Environmental protection is important, sustainability is important, but trade is and continues to be important for food security, environmental sustainability, and to ensure resource efficiency. We hope you find the figures and findings in this report interesting and, above all, useful for your policy discussions this year and in the coming years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marion. We'll now hear from New Zealand's ambassador to the OECD, Caroline Bilkey.
Kia ora, good morning, and it's great to see such an impressive turnout in the auditorium for the launch of this very important report. Thank you very much, Marion, for your presentation. Useful and interesting. I thought it was fascinating. New Zealand greatly values the OECD's flagship Agricultural Policy Monitoring and Evaluation Report, it continues to be a vital resource for our officials and policymakers, providing a robust, transparent and long-term evidence base. It really is the OECD at its best. For us, the producer support estimate data is particularly valuable as a comparative measure of the level and composition of domestic support to agriculture over time to track changes in agricultural policy. New Zealand refers to the PSE often in the trade context as it offers clear insights into how countries' domestic support policies are affecting global trade. With this information, we can better understand, the policy landscape our agricultural exporters are facing. The PSE measure supports our efforts to draw attention to the need for fair, open and rules-based trade, which can be distorted, as Marion mentioned, by measures such as market price support and payments to individual farmers that distort agricultural production and trade and are environmentally harmful. The strength of the report lies not only in its comprehensive coverage of 54 countries, including both OECD and non-OECD, but also in its consistency and methodological rigour. What is clear from the PSC time series is that for the past 2 decades, agricultural reform has been stalled and that not enough money is being invested by countries into research and development to support transformative solutions for sustainable agriculture and food systems. New Zealand remains committed to promoting open, transparent and undistorted agricultural trade, and the OECD's work plays a key role in supporting that vision, including in our engagement at the World Trade Organization. By providing a shared evidence base, the report fosters constructive dialogue among countries, helps us collectively advance agricultural systems that are market-oriented, resilient and inclusive. We thank the OECD Secretariat and the countries covered in the report for their continued collaboration, and we look forward to using this year's report to inform our policy thinking and international engagement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. We'll now hear from the Netherlands Ambassador to the OECD, Jochem Veers.
Good morning, everybody. I will try to say things that are have not already been said by my New Zealand colleague. 2 small states with a big agricultural sector, after all, on opposite sides of the world. On behalf of the Netherlands, I first want to thank the OECD for the opportunities to say a few words about this flagship report. I'm not going to go into why this report is very relevant and important, because it has been said. Just to add that it's a very trusted reference for us. That informs policy decisions back home, but also in the European Union and in other fora. It shapes both bilateral and multilateral engagements. It promotes reforms in alignment with global best practices. And I'm very happy to see the report pays attention to the complex linkages between agri-food trade on the one hand, climate and the environment on the other hand. And the organization took a bit of a risk, because what you probably didn't know is that I spent almost 5 years of my life on a PhD on trade and environment. So I would almost say, don't get me started on this subject, but I will be brief, I promise. Allow me to briefly situate the trade and environment nexus in the context of Dutch agriculture. First of all, the Netherlands is among the world's leading exporters of agricultural products, which makes trade-related environmental policies particularly critical for us. And as this report shows, linking trade measures to environmental objectives presents both opportunities but challenges as well. On the one hand, carefully designed policies can actually accelerate the transition towards more sustainable food systems, including in my country and the EU. On the other hand, a proliferation of overlapping regulations risks creating trade barriers and also increasing compliance costs. And those costs burden often most heavily smaller producers, both at home, but especially in countries in the global south. And therefore, policymakers are facing a really delicate balancing act. We want to protect the climate and the environment. We want to maintain open trade, and we need to ensure affordable food for consumers. So policymakers from the agricultural and trade departments will really have to find this balance together. I'm happy to say that in my capital, both are in the same building, so that helps. And I can also report that in Brussels, the trade and agricultural people are working much better together than they used to. Then something on voluntary market initiatives. They have become quite important in the Netherlands. Labeling schemes, certification programs allow companies to demonstrate sustainable practices across their supply chains. These voluntary schemes drive innovation by encouraging companies to adopt environmentally friendly technologies and processes. They accelerate sustainability transitions without imposing rigid legal obligations. And this approach actually aligns closely with Dutch policy priorities of the moment. We want to achieve the relevant SDG targets, but we also want to foster economic innovation and enhance our international competitiveness without resorting necessarily to heavy-handed regulation. We have examples which are called EOSTA and platforms such as IDH that show that Dutch exporters are integrating environmental standards into their trade practices themselves. And some traders even reference these initiatives themselves directly. Finally, I would say that the Agricultural Policy Monitoring Evaluation Report provides necessary and important guidance for navigating the complex intersection of trade and environment. You can do this right, but you can also in many ways do this wrongly. So this report equips us with insights, but also data needed to develop policies that are not only effective, but also equitable, innovative, and globally competitive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. We will now hear from Mr. Osamu Kubota, who is the Deputy Assistant Minister at the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries of Japan. Minister.
Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to speak here. First of all, I would like to extend my heartfelt congratulations on the launch of the Agricultural Policy Evaluation and Monitoring and Evaluation Report 2025. Actually, I was working at the OECD Secretariat once from 2003 to 2007 and was involved in writing the monitoring report then. So therefore, I am very happy to come back here to have our opportunity to speak here today. We believe one of the M&A report's key strengths is that it's track major countries' agricultural policy over the long term based on objective and analytical indicators. There are various approaches to policy evaluations, but I believe evaluation based on objective, unchanging standard provides a fundamental basis. This is what the monitoring and the evaluation report is for. Each country set policy target based on its own circumstances, and they evaluate the effectiveness of its policies in accordance with those targets. For example, in the case of Japan, in order to evaluate key policies such as generational transition policies and environmental policies, we set targets like the number of new entrants and fertilizer usage. On the other hand, it is also necessary to evaluate policies by comparing them with other countries or examining long-term policy changes, which requires some consistent and common indicators. M&A report and the PSE serve as useful tools for this purpose. By incorporating the country-by-country analysis provided by the OECD into our policy evaluation, we are able to examine our policies from a broader perspective. Furthermore, since policy objectives change over time, consistent data set measured using the same methodology over a long period are also valuable for observing long-term policy shift. In this way, we utilize the monitoring report as one of the bases for evaluating our policies. M&A report have already become one of the powerful tools for policy evaluations, but we also look forward to further evolution of the report. In particular, the sustainability of agriculture has become a major challenge in recent years, and we hope the M&A report will further respond to this trend. And in this sense, the special chapter of this year was trade and agriculture, environment in agriculture, which we think is a very welcome directions. We expect the M&D report to continually deepen its analysis of environmental and social sustainability, becoming standard reference not only for agricultural policy analysis, but also in the field of sustainability. Thank you very much, and congratulations.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you to all our speakers for their insights. I'd just like to remind everyone here in the room or following us online that the full report and other information is available on the OECD website, www.oecd.org. Thank you all. Download it, the video.
Thanks, Don.
Congratulations on that.